Can a couple of regular guys who happen to love the NFL successfully pick winners and losers as well as handicap Vegas lines on each and every NFL game? Well, I'm Matt Nicholson.
And I'm Jesse DeHoff.
And you are listening to the Home Dogs Podcast. We'll be doing one thing and one thing only here, and that's talking NFL football. So if you're a regular guy who loves the NFL, or you're interested in how these football fanatics stack up against the Vegas experts, this podcast is for you. You are listening to Home Dogs. Hola, mi amigos. You are viewing and listening to the Home Dogs Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Nicholson. I'm flying solo tonight. My partner in crime is not here. He's not able to be here tonight. His wife gave birth to a little girl about a week ago, so he's dealing with family stuff. So it's just I tonight. So we're going to talk a little NFL as usual. We'll talk about the owner meetings going on right now, the rules being proposed, the overtime changes being proposed. Good Lord, that was loud. Yeah, but first things first. So we have our first bet of the season, the first top five bet, week one. We got the Packers and the Bears. The NFL released will it be opening night on Thursday, September 5th. It's going to be the Packers visiting the Bears, and the Bears are currently 4-point favorites on most websites, most gambling sites. Right now, that's I went and placed a wager today on the Packers +4 against the Bears. I think that that's a tremendous bet this early. Get Aaron Rodgers getting 4 points on the road. Are you kidding me? So that's my first bet of the 2019 NFL season. So I was excited about that. But the big news was that the NFL decided to not go with what they had been doing the last 15 years or so, and that's the defending Super Bowl champion hosting the Thursday night game, the opening Thursday night game, which would be the Patriots. They decided to go with the Packers and the Bears, and now the Patriots will be hosting a game on Sunday Night Football on NBC, the opening Sunday night game. And I found this to be very interesting. So it's like, why all of a sudden do you just, buck tradition and decide that you're not going to have the Patriots host the game? You've been doing that every single year, and everybody just sits around, looks at the schedule, and see who the team's scheduled to play, and tries to figure out what that opening Thursday night game is going to be. Well, all of a sudden, they just decide just to nix that, and they go with the Bears Packers. They think it's like the Bears Packers series is like 95-97 overall, something like that. So they're this historic rivalry the NFL wants to showcase, but. So I was trying to think to myself, why in the world would the NFL do this? Why would they decide not to go with the Patriots? A lot of people are saying it's Robert Kraft, the whole situation going on with him. I don't think that has anything to do with it because he stepped down from the Patriots he stepped down from the board. So I don't think that has anything to do with it. And as a Colts fan, I can appreciate this. I think everybody's just sick and tired of the Patriots being front and center all the time. I think the general NFL fan base is just wore out with the Patriots, and a Thursday night opener with the Patriots raising another freaking banner in Foxborough would cause a lot of people just to tune out, and it's something that would leave a very bitter taste in the mouth of a lot of NFL fans. So I think that's part of it, but I think another part of it is that I was looking at the Patriots' schedule, and they haven't released the schedule yet, but you can see which teams are going to play, which teams are going to host at home and all that. But I noticed that they have the Chiefs at home, they have the Steelers at home, they have the Browns at home, and they have, obviously the Jets, Bills, and they play the two NFC East teams. But so when I was looking at their schedule last week before the NFL announced this, I was saying like, I wonder which one they're going to go with. Are they going to go with the Browns on opening night? Or are they going to go with the the Steelers, the Chiefs, which team's going to, get that opening nod? And I was just sitting there thinking, none of these games really make sense to have on an opening Thursday night. The Patriots Browns in my opinion, a very high likelihood of being a bore fest. You're going to see a inexperienced Browns team on, opening night. Like, I don't think the NFL would want to do that. And that matchup's far too compelling right now with Odell Beckham to put on that Thursday night opener. The Thursday night opener is going to get huge ratings regardless of who's playing. So, the NFL doesn't want to showcase a potential Patriots Chiefs, hot shot game, or Browns Patriots, or the Steelers are not very compelling anymore without Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. But so I think that that Chiefs and Browns matchup in Foxborough, I don't think the NFL wanted to go with on an opening Thursday night, because those are their kind of mid-season spotlight games that the NFL wanted to save. You don't want to take a game that's going to get huge ratings, on a Sunday afternoon and put it on prime time on Thursday night, to where you're basically, there's just no point in doing it. Like, you want to put a game on there that you don't think is going to draw huge ratings in the regular season. So the question is, now the Patriots are scheduled on that Sunday night opener on NBC, and their opponent hasn't been announced yet. So I just find this whole thing interesting to see what the NFL does, and I will make a prediction right now. I don't think it'll be the Steelers or the Chiefs or the Browns. I think all three of those teams or all three of those matchups are matchups you want to save for further down the line. Remember that the Patriots don't play very well in September. The Patriots kind of use September as a kind of extended training camp. So because of that, you don't want to hot shot a Chiefs-Patriots matchup that's going to get, enormous ratings and potentially have a bad football game due to teams just not being in, mid-season form. And same thing with the Browns. Steelers, I think it's just not very interesting. And because of all that, I think that the Sunday night opener in Foxborough is going to be the Jets at the Patriots. And the reason I think it's going to be the Jets is because the Jets going to New England is just not very interesting. It's not something that you're going to get excited for as a football fan. It's generally a bad game. The Patriots blow them out, and it's just not a game that is going to garner a whole lot of intrigue and excitement and all that. But if you put the Jets in Foxborough on Sunday night, and it'd be Le'Veon Bell's first game in almost 2 years with the Jets in Foxborough against the defending champions, and all the improvements that the Jets made, and Sam Darnold, starting his second year as an NFL quarterback, and Adam Gase, a new head coach, all of a sudden that game is far more compelling and far more interesting than it ever would be not being on, Sunday night in week one. So I think the Jets and the Patriots is what we're going to get on Sunday night that first week. I think that the NFL is going to do a Raiders-Chiefs Monday night opener for the late game. They do 2 games on Monday night to start the season. I think that the Raiders and Chiefs will be one of the late games. I have no clue what the early games will be. I'm not even going to try and guess. But so I found that whole thing interesting, and I've had some people that I know when I was talked to, and they would ask me if I thought that this was something that was a big deal, the NFL bucking tradition and going against the grain. And I think it is a big deal. I think for the NFL to not want to put the Patriots on prime time on Thursday night to start the season, I think is, the NFL kind of acknowledging that as a general public, people they're just fatigued with the Patriots. They're just tired of seeing the Patriots all the time, tired of Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, and it's to a point where, you don't want the fans to tune out of that Thursday night game. So you have the Bears-Packers, you have an interdivisional matchup on Thursday night, and that's something that the NFL is going to start doing more, is if these early primetime matchups put division rivals up against each other instead of interconference opponent or whoever they play on their schedule, have an interdivisional matchup where the teams know each other a little bit better and the games might be a little more crisp, and thus you'll see better football played early in the season. So I think you're going to see the NFL move to more divisional games the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season to kind of have crisper football being played. I do think it's a big deal that they do not want the Patriots on opening night on Thursday. I think that's a big deal. So, the NFL owners are having their annual off-season meetings this week. They started today. There's a lot of rules that are being proposed right now. There was a rule that the Broncos proposed as far as in the fourth quarter you would be able to one time, instead of going for an onside kick, you'd go for a 4th and 15 from the 35-yard line, your own 35-yard line. And if you converted that 15-yard or that 4th and 15 or whatever, you'd get the ball back, like if you recovered an onside kick. That rule proposal or whatever was voted down by the owners, and now they're discussing a 1-year trial of instant replay to be able to decide pass interference calls, roughing the passer, hits on defenseless receivers. They are talking about experimenting for a 1-year basis on instant replay to be used on all these plays that are kind of judgment calls, and I don't know how to feel about it, because what you're doing is you're saying, okay, so we are completely taking, if you're gonna say, well, okay, we're able to challenge pass interference now, and we're able to challenge hits on defenseless receivers, and we're able to challenge, chop blocks or whatever, blindside blocks, which is another thing the NFL banned this offseason. If you're going to do that, then from what I understand, I could be wrong about this, I think that for the replay booth to be able to challenge or to take a look at a certain play, I think that there has to be a flag thrown on the play. And I do not want more flags being thrown. And if you tell these officials that, these plays can only be reviewed if there's flags thrown, you're going to see way more flags being thrown, because these referees don't want to take a chance on missing a call, and you might as well, you can throw a flag and then they'll take a look at it, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. So I think this is a bad move if this is going to lead to the officials throwing way more flags on all these kind of bang plays. It's going to disrupt the flow of the games, and it's going to be miserable to watch. However, if they are going to allow not just plays that are flagged, but they're going to allow, let's say that a receiver gets mugged by a defensive back and there's no call, and the guy up in the replay booth says, we need to take another look at this because he just got mugged going down the field. I think that if they do that, where it doesn't have to be a flag thrown, I am actually supportive of that. I think the important thing is they get the call right, and if it doesn't disrupt the flow of the game, and it's not going to be where every other play could be, reviewed and all that, I 100% support that, because there's been so many plays where the referees didn't blow the whistle, and it negatively, affected the game. Case in point, the Saints-Rams NFC Championship game last year. Now, I think that the Rams were the better team, and I think the Saints fans just, bitch a lot about that. Like, the Saints got away with a huge face mask call on the drive right before that whole thing took place in the fourth quarter. That would have given the Rams basically, a first and goal on the one, and would have got them a touchdown. But on that one play where there's a kind of blatant pass interference, but they didn't call it, and the Saints end up having to give the ball back. Instead of the Saints getting the first down and being able to run out the clock, they had to punt it back to the Rams, and the Rams were able to get a field goal and win the game. But in that situation where if an official can be told, hey, take another look at this, you need to make sure you get this call right, and he's able to go to the booth and see, yeah, this was blatant pass interference, and then he ends up ruling on it, and the play gets called right, then I think that's great. I think that I'm 100% behind that. So another rule that's being proposed is the Kansas City Chiefs are proposing that both teams get a possession in overtime. So the way that the NFL overtime rules work right now, if you don't know, and you should, is that when a team, there's a coin toss to start overtime, and when the team elects to receive, whoever wins the coin toss when they elect to receive, if they march down and score a touchdown on their opening drive, the game's over. But if they kick a field goal, then the other team gets the ball with a chance to kick a field goal to tie or score a touchdown or whatever. And if they kick a field goal in this tie game, then it goes into sudden death. Well, the Chiefs want to eliminate that aspect of it to where if you give up a touchdown, you lose the game. They want both teams to get the ball. And I cannot stand people who cry about the overtime rules. And the Chiefs are proposing this whole thing because obviously the AFC Championship game, that game went in overtime. It was 31-31, I believe. And the Patriots won the toss, and they got the ball. And that Chiefs defense could not get them off the field on 3rd and long. Tom Brady kept on picking up first down after first down after first down, marching down and scored a touchdown. And that's what cost the Chiefs the game, is the fact that their defense couldn't get a freaking stop. So I don't feel sorry for these teams that, in that situation, defense can't rise up and make one play. And especially for a team like the Chiefs who had all these great pass rushers and they couldn't get near Tom Brady. In that situation, at home, with that crowd and everything, you gotta make a stop there. And because you can't stop them, you shouldn't win the game. And now you want to propose a rule where both teams get the ball. It's just this whole thing about it's not fair. It's not fair. It's like you have 60 minutes to go out there and win the game. If you can't win the damn game in 60 minutes, don't complain about what happens in overtime. So I have a feeling that the owners will make this change to the overtime rules. I think that they'll be where both teams get the ball and for a possession, and then it goes into sudden death. But I can't stand that. I think that the Chiefs need to stop whining. Andy Reid needs to stop whining like you couldn't get the job done. In that AFC Championship game, you won the toss to start the game. You elected to kick off to the Patriots. They have a 13-minute drive to start the game, and right there killed any chance you had to play your style of football. And that cost you the game. And I don't think they should change the overtime rules just to suit, these teams that have these terrible defenses that can't get anybody off the freaking field. So I think that the Chiefs need to stop whining about, the fact that they weren't able to get the ball on offense. You had, I think, 3 3rd and 9 or longer, 3 third downs where the Patriots had to pick up 9 yards or more for the first down, and you couldn't get them off the field. So I think that the right team won, and I think that the fact that the Chiefs are, crying about this at the owner meetings is really stupid, and I hope they don't change the overtime rules. I like them just the way they are. If you can't stop a team from marching down the field like that, you don't deserve to win the game. So that's the way I feel about it. And I do like how there's I say a touch of hypocrisy because the Colts were notorious for going to these owner meetings and lobbying the NFL to change the rules as far as what defensive backs can do to receivers, and because of the result of all those Patriots-Colts games. But I like the overtime rules the way they are. So it's been 2 weeks. We had to miss last week's podcast because of issues with family and work and all that stuff. So we weren't able to really talk about the free agency period and Odell Beckham trade and Le'Veon Bell going to the Jets and all that stuff like we wanted to. But as far as winners and losers of free agency, to me, obviously the Browns are huge winners. They got one of the best receivers in the NFL. They picked up a great defensive tackle in Sheldon Richardson. They got 2 solid pass rushers to go along with Myles Garrett. They need help along the offensive line. And then picking up Kareem Hunt, like the Browns have had a tremendous offseason so far, and I worry about it being too much hype. But the team that I am most impressed with what they've done this offseason is the Green Bay Packers. What they have been able to do, bringing in the Smith boys, as edge rushers. They brought in Amos from the Bears, safety. He plays both safety positions, but he's a budding superstar. And they brought in Miles Turner from the Broncos, I believe. Not Miles Turner. Last name's Turner. I can't remember. The offensive lineman from the Broncos. So they've bolstered their offensive line, and they've gotten 3 tremendous defensive players. One stabilizes their secondary. They got 2 great edge rushers. And, they went out there and they spent money for the first time in a while, on some key free agents. And I think that the Packers understand that their window is closing with Aaron Rodgers. Excuse me. And I love the moves they made. I think it makes them very dangerous defensively, especially with Amos back there at safety. He's a ball hawking safety, and he breaks up a lot of passes. Great in coverage. And they plucked him from the Bears, which is, obviously a, great thing for them, an interdivisional rival. But yeah, I love what the Packers have done this offseason. I think they set themselves up really well. I like what the Bills have done, putting that talent around Josh Allen. They haven't made any terribly splashy moves, but they, signed Morse from the Chiefs, the offensive lineman, to help stabilize that offensive line. They signed John Brown from the Ravens. They signed Beasley from the Cowboys, 2 receivers to get paired with Josh Allen. They got Frank Gore to come in there to help solidify the running game with Chris Ivory and LaShawn McCoy. And I think that they're just building a solid nucleus of talent around Josh Allen on offense. I think that they're wanting to be a ball control offense, and obviously they have a very solid defense that got them to the playoffs 2 seasons ago. So I like what the Bills have done. The teams that I think really kind of soiled the bed, if you will, in free agency, obviously the New York Giants, like a lot of people are killing them for what they did, but I'm not really on that bandwagon as far as the Giants. I like the Odell Beckham trade. They were able to pick up an additional first-round pick and a safety to replace Landon Collins. I mean, it was a box safety for a box safety, but you get a younger, more talented receiver or more talented safety to replace him for far cheaper than what you'd have to pay for Landon Collins. They were able to, pick up a Zeitler, I think his name is, from the Browns in that trade where they traded Olivier Vernon. So the Giants got better along the offensive line to block for Saquon Barkley. They, the Golden Tate signing obviously was, a head scratcher, but I think what Golden Tate gives you is, solid hands. He's a solid receiver. He's not, a game breaker necessarily, but he's exactly what Eli Manning needs. He's a possession type receiver who can break tackles and, make guys miss after catching the ball, but he's not someone that you're going to sign if you want to push the ball and just move the ball down the field. And obviously Eli Manning, at this point in his career, can't push the ball down the field like he used to, which is why Odell Beckham went out of New York. So I'm not I don't think the Giants will be very good next year, but I'm not going to kill them for what they did this offseason. But the biggest loser of free agency to me was the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans, they didn't even go after Le'Veon Bell at all. They have Deshaun Watson, the guy who was absolutely destroyed last year. He had like 56 sacks. And the Texans, up to this point, have not even addressed their offensive line one iota. They have like the 24th pick in the draft. So, any of the top linemen they're not going to get unless they trade up. They haven't made any kind of effort to improve that offensive line, which got Deshaun Watson killed last year. And with the Colts, ready to, with Andrew Luck and everything being healthy and them going on looking like the cream of the crop in terms of the AFC South, and you have Nick Foles with the Jaguars, the Titans, what they're doing. The Texans are in a situation where if they're going to compete, they have to keep Deshaun Watson healthy, and you need to make some moves along that offensive line. They haven't done a single thing. They haven't done a single thing, and Deshaun Watson got destroyed last year, like 56 sacks. And so now, you're running the risk of getting him hurt again, and if he's not healthy, they have no chance to compete in the AFC South. So I don't understand what the hell the Texans are doing. They haven't improved at all this offseason. I think it's, they obviously DeAndre Thomas retired. They do get Kyle Fuller back at receiver next year, but in terms of, they haven't improved that running game, and they haven't improved the offensive line. So it looks like Deshaun Watson is going to be asked to do everything all over again, and it looks like there's another long season in store for Deshaun Watson, who's going to have to use those legs to avoid that rush, because, man, I don't know what the Texans are doing. But they're a big loser in free agency. The Chiefs are another team that they've blown up their defense. So I don't get what the Chiefs are doing. They have a situation where they have blown up their defense. They've gotten rid of, D Ford is with the 49ers. They cut Eric Berry. They let Steven Nelson, the cornerback, go. He's playing for the Steelers now. Obviously, Justin Houston's playing for the Colts. Got signed this past week, which I thought was a really good move for the Colts. Low risk, high reward. And so they've blown up this defense that wasn't very good in the first place. The one thing they could do is rush the passer when these teams are trying to throw to, because, Patrick Mahomes and everything got them out to some big leads. And these teams were forced to throw the ball and become one-dimensional. And these guys were able to just tee off on the quarterbacks. Well, they're getting rid of all these pass rushers and just blowing up this defense. They got Tyrann Mathieu in there at safety, which I like that move. But over the course of the season, like how sure are we that this guy can stay healthy? And now you have Steve Spagnuolo who's in there, who had those great defenses with the Giants when they won the Super Bowls. But I don't understand what the Chiefs are doing. And if you look at Patrick Mahomes' stats last year, this was a different Chiefs team after Kareem Hunt got cut by the Chiefs. Now, this was a different Patrick Mahomes. It was a different Chiefs team altogether. I believe they went something like 4-3 or something like that down the stretch without Kareem Hunt. So without him in the backfield, they struggled. And, they brought in Carlos Hyde to help kind of Jamal Williams in that rushing attack. But the Chiefs haven't got better anywhere. And all that's happened is they blew up their defense. They don't have as good a running game as they had to start last season with Kareem Hunt. Tyreek Hill is in trouble with the law now. All these allegations coming out about him, and you have no idea what could happen with that. Samuel Watkins is always hurt, so the Chiefs are looking like a wounded, fragile team coming into the next season, and it's going to be interesting to see if Patrick Mahomes has to really carry this team, if he's able to do it, because the front office is not helping Patrick Mahomes out at all right now. So as far as getting him weapons, so that's the Chiefs are a big loser in terms of making moves to compete for a Super Bowl. And nobody else that really stands out to me. I mean, there's the Lions made a lot of head scratching moves. I don't think they're anywhere near being able to compete for a Super Bowl, which is why you would give a guy like Trey Flowers and give those guys all that money that they did, and shell out money to like Julian Edelman and these guys who are just high priced. In Julian Edelman's case, past his prime, and Trey Flowers' case, like, how many times have we seen guys play well for the Patriots, get big deals at other places, and not produce? So I do not like what the Lions have done. I think they're just setting themselves up to be this colossal failure that's going to end up in salary cap hell, and they're going to have to basically do a fire sale and have to just break down and rebuild. I don't think that signing these high-priced free agents is going to give them a bridge to success. So I don't like what the Lions have done this offseason. So those would be the big winners and losers for me. I love the Jets signing Le'Veon Bell. So he hasn't played in almost 2 seasons, or he hasn't played in almost 2 years, I should say. By the time September rolls around, it'll be like 20 months since he's played in a professional football game. And the question is, how productive is he going to be? He got like a 4-year, $52 million contract, something like 30-something million guaranteed. And I said here, I figured he'd go to the Jets because they had the most money to spend and they were the team that's most desperately in need of a running back. But it'd be interesting to see how the Jets use him. I think that they're going to use him more as a pass catcher out of the backfield. I'd be surprised if you saw him get more than 20 carries a lot of games, more than 15 carries in a lot of cases. I don't think they want to, especially early in the season, they're not going to want to pound him too much and get him beat up. When they made that much of a financial investment in him, I think they're going to use him more to catch passes out of the backfield to be kind of a safety net for Sam Darnold. But I love the Jets, what they did signing Le'Veon Bell, and the other moves they made, signing like C.J. Mosley and Crowder from, where did Crowder come from? The Redskins, I believe. So at wide receiver, they made a lot of moves to get better, the Jets have. And if they can, on offense, produce and not turn the ball over with Sam Darnold, I think they have a chance to be a 9 or 10 win team next year. So I like what the Jets have done. I think Adam Gase will get the most out of Sam Darnold, and I think that he will figure out ways to really utilize Le'Veon Bell and all his talents, especially catching the ball. But so the final thing before we're going to take a break here in a few minutes, and then we're going to get into the Falcons and the Panthers 2018 seasons. But so the NFL draft is on April 25th, and right now all you're hearing is the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray. Like, where the hell is Kyler Murray going to end up? Are the Cardinals going to take him number 1? I'm not buying for a second that the Cardinals are going to draft Kyler Murray number 1. They have Josh Rosen. They're high on this guy. Josh Rosen has all the talent in the world. He has everything you want in a quarterback. They invested a first-round pick in him. And Kyler Murray is a guy who played 1 year of college football. He's undersized. He's a smaller guy. He's not. I think he's so overhyped. But I don't think the Cardinals for a second are going to invest the first pick in the draft in a quarterback like that with all the defensive talent on the board and a quarterback in Josh Rosen who showed some flashes last year of being a really good quarterback. So this whole thing with Cliff Kingsbury, he's being real coy and saying he doesn't know what they're going to do. Obviously, what the Cardinals are doing here is they want people to think that they are going to take Kyler Murray, hoping that a team comes out of the woodwork and offers this massive trade package for the first pick of the draft and the ability to draft Kyler Murray. And then the Cardinals can get a huge trade haul and add more talent to their roster and build more depth. Well, so we're sitting there wondering, where in the hell is Kyler Murray going to end up? Like, if the Cardinals do trade him, who's going to trade up for him? Obviously, you always have to wonder about the Redskins. The Redskins are that team that always has to make the flashy move, but you have to wonder if they even have the ammunition to do it, and if they would be a little gun-shy after the whole Robert Griffin debacle in 2012, trading up to draft him, and then him end up getting injured after his first season. The Giants obviously have 2 first-round picks. I don't think the Giants want Kyler Murray. I think the Giants are higher on Haskins out of Ohio State and Drew Lock out of Missouri, and even Daniel Jones out of Duke in the second round. I think the Giants would be more comfortable drafting a quarterback further down in the draft and using those top 2 picks in the first round to get better on the offensive line and potentially get another target for Eli Manning and help this team be able to win next year. I do not think they don't want to spend a first round pick on a quarterback just to have Eli Manning go out there for one more season. I think it'd be a total waste. So you have the Bengals that people are talking about that could potentially move up. You have the Raiders that people are saying, John Gruden would love to get his hands on Kyler Murray. I just I think the Raiders are in such a good spot right now. Speaking of teams that won the free agency period, I think the Raiders are in such a good spot right now. The talent they've added, getting Antonio Brown, with 3 first-round picks and I think 5 in the top 101 picks of the draft, they have the ability to assemble a very talented roster, and I would hate to see them spend a bunch of top picks to go after Kyler Murray when you have Derek Carr, who went 9 games last year without throwing an interception and looked pretty darn good at the end of the season. So right now, I have no idea where Kyler Murray is going to end up. You have the Giants, you have the Redskins that need a quarterback, you have the Bengals. You're hearing a lot of Patriots, this and that. Would the Patriots try to trade up for him? Maybe the Dolphins try. I don't know, but right now, I do not think Kyler Murray is going to get drafted by the Cardinals. And if they do draft him, I think it's the dumbest thing in the world to do. And if I was the Giants, if the Cardinals draft Kyler Murray, I'm spending a second-round pick and getting Josh Rosen and letting him sit for a year and potentially getting a franchise quarterback who, after Eli retires after this season, he'll be 23 years old, 2 years in the league. That's what I'll do if I'm the Giants. If the Cardinals are dumb enough to draft Kyler Murray, who, like I said, he's like 5'9", 5'10", undersized. He's a guy who likes to get out and run. And now, obviously, at the combine, he's been trying to not move very much because he wants to be a pocket QB. But like, you get on the football field, instinct takes over. This guy's been a runner his whole life. He's been someone who he's just an athlete. He makes plays based on his athleticism. Like, when he gets out on the football field, instinct's going to take over, and he's going to scramble, and you're going to get beat up, and he's not going to last, especially with that smaller frame, that smaller body. So I think that the Cardinals are nuts if they draft Kyler Murray. I do not think he's going to the Cardinals. I think they're going to auction off that number 1 pick, and if they do end up making that number 1 selection, they will draft either Nick Bosa or Quentin Williams. Watch out for Quentin Williams, because the Cardinals are adding some. They got Terrell Suggs and Chandler Jones, some pass rushers, and watch out for Quentin Williams, a defensive tackle from Alabama. He's a dark horse to go number 1 overall. He's a big defensive tackle that clogs up the middle, takes up double teams. And if I was the Cardinals, I go with him or I go with Nick Bosa. I do not draft Kyler Murray. And right now, I don't know where Kyler Murray's going to end up, and it's the most fascinating thing I've seen in quite a while. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about the Falcons of Atlanta and the Panthers of Carolina. Their 2018 campaigns both were extremely disappointing for the organizations that had Super Bowl aspirations with Pro Bowl caliber quarterbacks. I'm going to tell you what went wrong, go over the season, and yep. So I'll be right back after the break. No, you're not dreaming. I'm really here. Once again, you are watching the Home Dogs podcast. I'm your host, Matt Nicholson, flying solo tonight. So it's time to talk about the NFC South. We're only going to do two teams tonight. First, we're going to start with the Atlanta Falcons. What was the 2018 Atlanta Falcons campaign? So the Atlanta Falcons, every single year in the NFL, there is a team that just is ravished by injuries. And last year, that was the Falcons. They lost Deion Jones, their starting linebacker. They lost Grady Jarrett, their starting defensive tackle. They lost both their safeties to injuries for most of the season. Devontae Freeman, their starting running back, he ended up going on IR at one point. Tevin Coleman, their backup running back, was injured for part of the year. They had all kinds of injuries across the offensive line. So, and especially on defense, at one point in the season, three of their four starting defensive linemen were guys that weren't in training camp with the team. They'd been signed since the beginning of the regular season. So they really just were decimated by injuries. And it was a shame, too, because Matt Ryan had himself a hell of a year. Matt Ryan threw for 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, had a career high 69.6% completion percentage. And the Falcons ended up going 7-9, and all 7 of their wins came against teams with sub 500 records. So they did not have a single win all year long versus a team with a winning record. Now, they beat the Panthers week 2 that were 1-0. I'm not counting that. I'm talking about teams that finished with a winning record. They did not have a win all season long. They were in a position on opening night in Philadelphia on that opening Thursday night game, and they had all kinds of opportunities to win that game. They won the time of possession battle. They had just opportunity after opportunity. Nick Foles was not able to get the ball in the end zone. They were, kicking field goals, and the Falcons just came up short. They lost that opening night game 18-12, and it felt like a huge opportunity missed. Now, they bounced back with a win in week 2 versus the Panthers, but then they go on a 3-game losing streak against the Saints, the Bengals, and the Steelers to start the season out 1-4. And at that point, when you're 1-4, you're fighting, an uphill battle, and you're facing, your division rivals Saints are undefeated at the time, and you know that you're going to have to reel off 10 of 11 games or whatever to compete. It's a real mental struggle for a team like that to bounce back from, especially dealing with all the injuries that they were dealing with on defense, especially. So week 3 they lost to the Saints in overtime, and a total heartbreaker where they lost the coin toss in overtime, and the Saints were able to come down, and Drew Brees obviously had that great broken tackle where he dived into the end zone for the touchdown. They lost to the Bengals at home on a last-second Andy Dalton touchdown pass, and then they go to Pittsburgh and get absolutely annihilated. I can't remember. It's like 41-17. They lost that game in Pittsburgh. So, but Matt Ryan continued to play well. He had a 3-game stretch against bad defenses, but it was the Bucs, the Giants, and the Redskins, where he threw for over 330 yards all 3 games. The Falcons won those 3 games. Were able to get back to 4-4. But then they go into Cleveland week 9, and they get pounded by the Browns. And at that point, the team just kind of threw in the towel. It was a situation where Matt Ryan couldn't, he was having a lot of success throwing the ball. Obviously, Julio Jones had a monster year for them. He had almost 1,700 receiving yards and 113 receptions for Julio Jones. But with Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman missing time, the Falcons had no semblance of a running game. They were totally one-dimensional. On defense, they were atrocious. They could not get teams off the field. That game against Baltimore, I think it was week 10 or 11, where the Ravens just ran all over the Falcons. They had like the ball for like 41 minutes. And so it was just I hate to see seasons like that. You saw it with Drew Brees a few times with the Saints, where you have these brilliant quarterback performances just go to waste because the team defensively is just bad. And that's what happened last year with Matt Ryan. I felt bad for the guy. He had no running game. Team was totally dependent on him to go out there and throw for 300-plus yards every single game. He had to throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns. I had to just go out there and outscore the other team to have any kind of chance of winning the game. And because of that, the Falcons struggled. At one point, they were 4-9. They won their last 3 games this season and improved to 7-9. But this was not a 7-9 football team. This was a 4-12, 5-11 team that were able to pick up a couple extra wins because of the brilliance of Matt Ryan. Now, they obviously have, Matt Ryan, who led them to a Super Bowl. They have Julio Jones, who I think is the best receiver in the NFL. And they're getting, so next season they're going to get Devontae Freeman back from injury. They're going to get all those guys back from injury that, they lost last season, that they didn't get any production from. And they were able to bring back Grady Jarrett, the defensive tackle, big nose tackle for them that, he clogs up that middle. He takes up a lot of double teams. And he is paramount. He has to be on the field for them starting 15, 16 games for them to be successful on defense. He clogs up that middle, takes up double teams, allows, those linebackers to grow, run around free and make plays. If Grady Jarrett's not, healthy, then it basically disrupts everything the Falcons want to do on defense. But what you saw last year is that the Falcons on offense, they relied too much on the big passing play, so they weren't able to have long time sustaining drives. The defense was out in the field for a long time. Defense got tired. They were terrible getting teams off the field on defense on 3rd down. And so you just had a situation where gradually the defense would just be, destroyed by the time the 4th quarter rolled around. They had, nothing left in the tank. And teams would just gash them on the ground, just run all over them. And the Falcons didn't have a chance. They relied too much on the big play. They couldn't run the ball. So they had to do a lot of short passing routes, to try to, just pick up a few, 3 or 4 steady yards here and there, which is why you usually depend on your running game for. But since Matt Ryan was out there playing without a running game, with a really, he had Julio Jones, but as his main target. But one guy, they drafted Stephen Ridley last year, wide receiver in the 1st round. Stephen Ridley had a huge year for the Saints. At one point, in one game this season, he had 3 touchdown catches. So that was a bright spot for the Atlanta Falcons, being able to pick up a guy like Stephen Ridley. And so next year, Deion Jones coming back from injury. Their safeties are going to come back. Grady Jarrett's coming back. What to expect from the Falcons coming into next season? Well, so far this offseason, they haven't really made a whole lot of moves. They signed a couple guards, which was important because they didn't want to protect Matt Ryan. They've got to be able to run the football. If they cannot run the football. So obviously when the Falcons went into the Super Bowl a couple years ago, they had that great running back combo of Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman, and you had the big Julio Jones, a target out there, a receiver, and a good offensive line. But they had a running game that they could depend on to move the chains, pick up 4 or 5 yards of carry, and it takes the pressure off Matt Ryan. And obviously, teams aren't able to, just play, know that they're not going to pick up anything against the run, or they're not going to be able to pick up anything on the ground, so they can just play the pass. And it just puts all kinds of pressure on Matt Ryan to make big plays the whole game. We get Devontae Freeman back from injury. Tevin Coleman has moved on. We'll see. They're in the market for a backup running back. They'll probably pick one up in the draft, but they've got to have that 2-headed dual threat at running back, to be able to be successful. And that defense in Atlanta, you're playing in a dome, in the Georgia Dome. That's a team. When you're playing in a dome, you want your defense to be predicated a lot on speed. And You want to be able to, rush the passer, especially in situations like on 3rd and long where the crowd's going crazy and the quarterback can't hear the signals. He can't hear what his coaching staff's telling him. He can't hear the plays coming in. Confuses quarterbacks. It's more conducive to the Falcons being able to generate a solid pass rush, and get teams off the field on 3rd down, which was their Achilles heel last year. On 3rd down, they were 31st in the NFL, allowing first down. 5 teams in the league. They're 5 worst teams in generating a pass rush and sack percentage, adjusted sack rate. So that was the problem with the Falcons last year. They could not generate a pass rush. They had no running game. The opposing offenses were out in the field for way too long. Wore the defense down, and when injuries derailed the team, they were out there with their 3rd string, 4th string, practice squad players trying to be competitive on a football field on a professional level. It's just not going to work. But they did because of, like I said, Matt Ryan's brilliant season. They were able to go 7-9. So ultimately, what they did is they cost themselves a better pick in the draft with that those last 3 wins. But Matt Ryan is a top 10 MVP caliber quarterback, and with the season he had last year, if they're 10-6 instead of 7-9, Matt Ryan is probably, he's right there with Drew Brees and Patrick Mahomes for the MVP award. But because they were terrible, he didn't get the kind of love for MVP that he probably should have gotten. But, the dude was just crazy on offense last year. They had 400 or more yards in, I think, 5 or 6 games, at least 5 games. And you doing that without any kind of running game, just with with Julio Jones out there getting double, triple teamed and using a rookie receiver as his primary red zone target. So a great season by Matt Ryan, but overall the Falcons, just injuries derailed their season and took what was probably a 10-6, 11-5 team and got them 7 wins. But they had a lot of bad luck as well. The Saints game in overtime at home, week 3, the Bengals game, week 4, where they lost on a last-second Andy Dalton touchdown pass. They should have won those 2 games. They win those 2 games. They're 9-7. Whole different outlook on the season. And so those are games that, unfortunately you have seasons like that and you have teams where they're unlucky with injuries. They're unlucky with, late game situations like that where, it seems like you're calling heads and it's constantly falling tails. And, that ends up balancing itself out. And, as you progress, into, the next season and stuff, that your luck ends up turning around and as far as 50-50 odds and things like that, those things end up rounding back into form. But they just had a terribly unlucky season. They lost 4 starters on defense. And like I said, they lost Devontae Freeman, the starting running back, to an injury. He was on injured reserve, I believe, after week 7. So the Atlanta Falcons, a team that a lot of people had going to the Super Bowl, greatly underachieved, and it's unfortunate because they could have made a Super Bowl run if they were able to stay healthy and had a little bit more luck. So, but moving into the next season, if they're just able to stay healthy and protect Matt Ryan and Devontae Freeman stays healthy, this is a team that's going to be back in the playoffs next year. So that was the Atlanta Falcons 2018 season. Obviously a disappointing season for them. Any team that has Super Bowl aspirations that finishes with a sub-500 record with a quarterback performance like Matt Ryan, you're going to be sick about it. If you feel like you're wasting his skills, which they pretty much are. But we saw that with Drew Brees and in New Orleans, and we see with other guys and other teams where they have these great quarterback performances and they just can't overcome the general weaknesses of their team. But they'll be okay next year, and that 31st ranked defense on DVOA will bounce back and be a top 15 defense again, and they'll be a top 10 running team because of the Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Stephen Ridley, downfield threats. So the Falcons are going to be okay moving forward, I think, and I'm interested to see what they do in the draft. I think they'll continue to draft offensive linemen to try to protect Matt Ryan. develop more of a running game, a power running game. They were 30th in the league last year in picking up first downs on second and third downs with less than 2 yards to go. So they were not good in the short yard situations. All that stuff, will be addressed. They'll either go offensive or defensive lineman in the draft, I believe. So that was the Atlanta Falcons. I want to move on. The last thing we're going to talk about tonight is another team from the NFC South that had a really disappointing season, especially with the way they started, and that was the Carolina Panthers. Now, they started the season off with a big win against the Dallas Cowboys at home. It was a game in which they sacked Dak Prescott 6 times. So the defensive line with Julius Peppers, like 38 years old, started the season off generating a lot of pressure. They looked really good on defense. The rushing attack for the Panthers, really all season long, was really good. And that's because you have Cam Newton, who's constantly getting 50, 60, 70 yards a game scrambling. You have Christian McCaffrey, who is just a really talented, slippery little running back who is able to find the holes along that offensive line. He's basically become Cam Newton's only primary target. I mean, running back, but Christian McCaffrey and Cam Newton make up like 80% of the Panthers' offense last year, and Christian McCaffrey by himself made up like 40% of their offense in terms of yards. So the Panthers, like I said, they start off with a win against Dallas. They lose week 2 at Atlanta, and then they beat the Bengals week 3. They beat the Giants week 4 at home. They go on the road to Washington in week 5 against Alex Smith. They lose to the Redskins, but after that, at that point, after week 5, they were 3-2, and they had a very tough stretch coming up where they were going to face the Eagles in Philadelphia. They're facing the Ravens at home, and then they were facing the Bucs, and they were going to be at Pittsburgh, at Detroit, home against Seattle. So that was a tough stretch for them going to this point. So they looked at this point in the season, and they said, okay, they're 3-2. They've got to beat either Philadelphia or Baltimore. Like that's, I remember at the time, saying that, they've got to pick up one of these wins with their schedule. And who they have to play, like they've got to win one of these games. Well, they end up winning both the game in Philadelphia and at home against Baltimore. And then week 8, they go and they beat the Buccaneers, or week 9, they beat the Buccaneers to improve to 6-2. Now, at this point, midway through the season, the Panthers are 6-2. That's 2 games behind the Saints, but they were right there. They had that first wild card spot, the 5th seed in the NFC locked up, and everybody and their brother thought that Panthers, if they just go 4-4, they're going to be 10-6 and they're going to make the playoffs. Well, up to this point, Cam Newton, the first 8 games, was having an MVP caliber year. He was throwing for 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He was averaging 242.5 yards per game passing the ball, as well as 60-plus yards running the ball a game. Christian McCaffrey was averaging over 60 yards rushing and 50 yards receiving. And the Panthers were just firing on all cylinders. Cam looked great. The defense was forcing turnovers, getting pressure on the quarterback, and the Panthers offense was taking care of the football. They weren't turning the ball over. Cam was not throwing bad interceptions. And because of that, they were able to just run the ball, control the clock, control time of possession, keep their defense fresh to be able to rush the passer. And it worked for them. So they were 6-2 and one of the top teams in the NFC. Well, something happened. Week 9, they go to Pittsburgh. And they lose that game 52-21, where they just get smashed against the Steelers. The Steelers just have their way with them all game long. And at this point, the Steelers are dealing with all that Le'Veon Bell controversy and all that crap going on in the locker room, all the drama going on around Pittsburgh, where they're inconsistent and not showing up 2 weeks in a row to play. But they go to Pittsburgh, and then when the Panthers went to Pittsburgh, the Steelers showed up to play. They had over 450 yards total offense. They were able to throw the ball 319 passing yards. They had 138 yards on the ground against the Panthers. And They were 5 for 5 in the red zone, 5 for 5. And that's another theme for the Panthers this past season, is that teams, when they got the ball in the red zone, the Panthers' red zone defense was atrocious. And I don't know if that's, what that's really about. That's more, the defense not being great against the run, having to bring more guys up in the box and having single coverage out on the outside, or what. But the Panthers were just terrible on defense in the red zone. And so the first 4 weeks of the season, the opposing offenses were 100%. I believe it was 9 for 9 in the red zone, getting the ball in the end zone. Not one time were they able to hold opposing offense to a field goal. And that really continued all season long for the Panthers. Well, not only that, but in the first 8 games, they had only turned the ball over 7 times, the Panthers did, compared to the 15 turnovers they had forced from the opposing team, from their opponents. So they had a +8 turnover differential the first 8 games. So Cam's playing great. Chris McCaffrey's playing great. They have a +8 turnover differential. They're not throwing interceptions. They're not fumbling. And the defense is, wrecking the opposing quarterback, getting pressure on them and not letting him get comfortable. Well, after they go into Pittsburgh, then they go into Detroit and they lose. Then they lose to Seattle. The Panthers end up, after starting the season 6-2, they lose their next 7 games. They lose 7 games in a row. And the last game of the year, they play the Saints in New Orleans that sat Drew Brees, that was resting all their starters, all their guys, and the Panthers got basically a meaningless win against the Saints, who was basically not, they had for the number 1 seed locked up, so they had nothing to play for. So if the Saints would have had any reason to play that game, play their starters, the Panthers would have finished the season on an 8-game losing streak. Now, the whole thing like Cam Newton is, people want to say he's a superstar and all that, and he's got otherworldly talent. The guy can throw the ball out of the stadium. He's 6'6", 245 pounds. He runs like a receiver. He's just one of the most physically gifted players in the NFL, not just quarterback, but players in the NFL. But the dude cannot, when he's forced to stay in the pocket and make throws, the dude can't play that way. He cannot be successful throwing the ball when he's contained and he's not allowed to get out and run around and make plays with his legs and make throws on the run. When he's forced to stay in the pocket and be a pocket quarterback, he is just not accurate. And that's why you see all these checkdowns to Christian McCaffrey, to where there's a correlation between McCaffrey's numbers catching the ball. That's when the Panthers played their worst, because Cam Newton was just checking down to Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey would have to make all these plays, getting all these yards after the catch. And, that wasn't conducive to a balanced offense when you're doing that. When you're not throwing the ball down the field, which the Panthers weren't able to do very well last year, and they rely on these guys making big plays after getting a 4-yard route where they just do a quick comeback route and they're forced to have to make plays, miss tackles, and all that. You're not gonna have success as an offense doing that. You have to be able to make plays down the field. And Cam Newton wasn't able to do that for the Panthers last year. Last 2 games of the season. You compare the first 8 games where he had 15 touchdowns and 4 interceptions to the next 6 games where he had 9 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, you can see why the Panthers went on this 7-game skid. And when people want to say that Cam Newton is an elite quarterback, it drives me freaking crazy. Because how many times did you see Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers or Ben Roethlisberger or any of these elite quarterbacks ever lose 7 games in a row? You don't see it. These guys, they're too good. They're not going to let their teams go out there and lose 7 freaking games in a row, especially when they're playing. In the second to last game of the year, they lost to the Falcons at home, which was awful, but Cam didn't play that game. But, I mean, this team could not play on the road last year. They were terrible on the road. And their defensive red zone, or their defense in the red zone, was atrocious. It was 29th in the league. They were good on third downs on offense. They were, top 12 in picking up first downs on third down conversions. And I mean, defensively on third downs, they weren't very good, and that's more to do with. And this was a tale of two teams, basically a tale of two cities, if you will. Where the first 8 games they were rushing the ball, they were controlling the clock, they were controlling the pace of the game, and forcing turnovers, forcing teams to do things they didn't want to do, play, the style of football the Panthers want to play, and obviously they were successful winning 6 out of 8 games. But after that, they just really struggled to, if the Panthers and Cam Newton, if they're not running the ball down your throat and they're not controlling the pace of the game and they're not controlling the tone of the game, they're not going to be successful. And you saw that the second half of the year. Now, a turning point for this team, after that Steelers loss, Week 10, they go into Detroit and they play the Lions. At this point, they're 6-3, and the Lions at this point, I believe, were 3-6, and had virtually no chance of making the playoffs. Well, they go in this game, and it's a kind of a slug-out, drug-out game. The Panthers at one point scored a touchdown. A kicker missed the extra point. And late in the game, they were down 20-13. Cam Newton leads the team down, scores a touchdown with like 20 seconds remaining in the game. And instead of kicking the extra point, because the kicker missed the extra point earlier in the game, they decide to go for 2. Now, there's this whole, adage in the NFL that you go for the win on the road, you go for the tie at home, because, when you're at home, things tend to bounce your way a little bit more. If you're on the road, you can pick up 2 yards and win the game, you go for the 2. That's what the Panthers did. They went for a 2-point conversion, and Cam Newton, instead of running the ball in, they called a passing play on the 2-yard line, and he wasn't able to complete the pass. The Panthers lost that game to the Lions, 20-19. And then they had to go the very next game against the Seahawks, who were building up momentum at this point. And the Seahawks just ran all over them. At that point, the Panthers were in a downward spiral they weren't going to be able to get themselves out of. And then they had to go 2 straight road games with the Bucks and the Browns, with Jameis Winston, who played well the second half of the year. And then you had Baker Mayfield obviously playing well with Cleveland. And it was just, it's like a cannonball came into, Carolinas, And so that's unfortunately what happened to the Panthers. They finished the season 7-9 as well as the Atlanta Falcons did. But the Carolina Panthers, like, just a horrible, horrible end of their season after starting 6-2 and legitimately, being a top contender for the NFC. You lose 7 games in a row. 7 games in a row. And you end up winning the last game of the season against the Saints in a meaningless game. Otherwise, you would have finished 6-10, and you would have finished on an 8-game losing streak. And, I mean, it was just, it was really tough to watch at certain points this season. And one of the things is they've got to figure out why they can't. They were 2-6 on the road this year. Their 2 wins came in Philadelphia when nobody expected them to win, and then the last game of the year in New Orleans against a Saints team that wasn't playing for anything. So they have to figure out why they can't play well on the road. That's number one. Their offensive line had issues last year with with injuries, and they've got to find a consistent pass rush on defense. You saw the first 8 games of the season, they were able to generate a pass rush, and that was more due to the fact that the Panthers offense was on the field for 34, 35 minutes a game, kept that defense more fresh, and in the fourth quarter they had more energy, and they were able to get after the passer. When you saw later on in the season, they weren't controlling the clock like they had been. You saw like a 38-year-old Julius Peppers, and the Panthers didn't have a single guy on that team that's a great pass rusher. Luke Kuechly is a tremendous just one-on-one. So he's a tremendous defensive player, but he's not the kind of pass rushing talent that they really need right now. tremendous inside linebacker. The Panthers this offseason have to focus on two things. They have to focus on their offensive line, and they've got to focus on whether they find a defensive end or an outside linebacker. They've got to get a pass rush off the edge, somebody that can get their safeties in one-on-one coverage where you're susceptible to the big play. And that's what happened this year for the Panthers, that second half of the year. Defensively, they were just, they were awful. They gave up over 300 yards of offense in every single game except the last game against the Saints. So, and teams weren't necessarily running the ball great against them. They were just able to throw the ball. They were able to complete big plays on the field. The Panthers did not have a pass rush, and ultimately what you had was the Panthers having to blitz, generate pass rush, a lot of one-on-one coverage, and the Panthers played in a division where they had to play Drew Brees twice, well, once, but then Matt Ryan twice. They had to play Jameis Winston, and then they had to play Ryan Fitzpatrick when he was super hot. It was, the first 4 games or whatever that he started. So the Panthers are kind of a victim of circumstance, but the second half of the year, like I said, the first half of the year, they were +8 turnover differential. The second half of the year, they were a -7 turnover differential. They had turned the ball over 15 times. They'd only forced 8 turnovers on defense. So like I said, for their entire season, they finished kind of in the middle of the road in a lot of DVOA stats and stuff. But if you just look at those last 8 games versus the first 8 games, it's really just two completely different teams. And Christian McCaffrey is a great player. He's a great guy that you want to use out of the backfield, catch him, balls as a security blanket. But when you start seeing him getting 10 plus catches, like that's way too many for this guy. Like he's not someone who. And I understand the Panthers offensively, they struggled. And Cam Newton doesn't have a lot of targets out there in Carolina. But when you see Christian McCaffrey getting 10-plus catches, then that they're relying too much on him catching balls out of the backfield. And it's going to become too predictable. And teams are just going to allow him to catch the ball, keep everything in front of him. And he's a smaller guy, and it takes away from the running game when they do that. And they rely on that short passing game. It takes away from the running game. He's not going to be as effective running the football, and that's where Christian McCaffrey, running the ball on first and second down and that pass catching option on third down is where he's really special. When you're, relying on him on first and second down to catch the ball, as a third or fourth option or whatever, just, a check down, which is basically what happened a lot of this year. He had over 400 yards after the catch, which means that he was catching the ball and he was running for most of his yards. It wasn't like Cam Newton was throwing 30, 40-yard passes out to Christian McCaffrey all the time. It was these 3-4 yard checkdowns that Christian McCaffrey would have to make special plays to be able to gain yardage. So the Panthers have to get, Cam Newton I think he doesn't necessarily need, these top-end receivers. I think Greg Olsen, what he did for them for all those years at tight end, I think, a solid pass-catching tight end would help the Panthers out a lot. They obviously need to find another running back to come in there and help take the pressure off Christian McCaffrey if they want to use him more in the passing game. And they've got to protect Cam Newton. He only got sacked 29 times this past year, but a majority of those sacks came in the second half of the season. That's when Cam Newton started forcing balls where he shouldn't have been. He ended up throwing, like I said, as many interceptions in the second half of the year as he did touchdowns. And because of that, the Panthers were -7 turnover differential, and that's going to be the difference in all these games when they're averaging 2 turnovers a game as opposed to the other team, the opponent's 1 turnover. That's a big deal. You're forcing your defense that was a little older to come out in situations that are very, very difficult to play solid defense in, and especially with when your top pass rusher is Julius Peppers, who's 38 years old, you're going to struggle. So defensive tackle Mario Addison, had 9 sacks this year. He led the team with 9 sacks, and like I said, he's a defensive tackle, so he wasn't somebody who you expected to have that kind of season. Julius Peppers, at I believe 38 years old, had a decent season. He had 5 sacks. The Panthers have a very young secondary, but they've got to have that. They've got to find 1 or 2 pass rushers that can come out there and just go after the passer, and can generate a pass rush without blitzing. Allow Luke Kuechly to kind of stay out there in coverage, roam around, make plays like he's prone to do. And that secondary of the Panthers is young, but they're talented. So I think moving forward, the Cam Newton thing is you're never going to have consistent success with Cam Newton unless they commit to like a Baltimore style offense where they just run the ball down the people's throats. And if they try to be a more, balanced offense where they're throwing 60% of the time, they're not going to be successful. They need to run the ball. They need to control the clock. They need to control the pace of the game. They've got to establish their will on offense. They've got to keep their defense off the field and force teams to play offensively out of rhythm. And if the Panthers are able to do that, they can be successful. They can make the playoffs, make a run. If they are not imposing their will on offense, then Cam Newton's out there playing out of rhythm, and that's when he ends up making big mistakes. So, like I said, the Panthers, horrible finish their season, just about as disappointing as you can get, losing 7 out of 8 games, losing 7 games in a row. It left an awful taste in the mouth of Panthers fans. And moving forward, for them to be successful, like I said, they've got to commit to the running game, and they need a pass-catching tight end, and they need to protect Cam Newton, let him run around and make plays, and stay out of 3rd and longs. 3rd and longs, that is Cam Newton's kryptonite. When he's forcing 3rd and long to stay in the pocket, and teams are able to defend him in a way where they force him to stay in the pocket, make throws, be accurate, Cam Newton struggles. That's not his game. They need 3rd and shorts where they can, run QB sneaks with Cam Newton. They can't be in 3rd and 9s. They need to be in 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s. If they're able to do that and win the time possession battle, then they'll be successful. But as far as what I think they're going to do in the draft, free agency, they've done pretty well. They've added a few pieces along the offensive line. Mike Preschel, or however you pronounce his name, they signed him. He's going to be their center. That's a tremendous move for them. It's going to stop a lot of that pressure up the middle on Cam Newton. And obviously, run blocking is going to help them run the football up the middle and force teams to respect the run a little bit more as far as the running backs are concerned. And it's going to open up things for their receivers, and it's going to spread out the defense, and you're going to see opportunities for the Panthers downfield that they wouldn't otherwise see. But yeah, they've got to construct game plans for Cam Newton where he's not going to go out there and chuck the ball around 35 times a game. He needs to be throwing the ball 20, 25 times a game, running the ball, handing off, and making plays. He's a playmaker. I say he's call him a pocket-style quarterback. And he's not necessarily a prototypical quarterback, but he's a playmaker. And when they commit to the run, and they're built around run the ball and their defense, you saw what they did a few years ago. They went 15-1. Now they had, downfield threats with what's his name, Ted Ginn Jr. and Kenoy Benjamin, or however you pronounce his name, and Cam Newton can throw the ball deep, and it opens up things downfield. Cam Newton can do that. He can throw the ball deep, but if they don't have a deep threat, that mid-range, meticulous 5 yards, 6 yards per down, like that's not Cam Newton's game. That's not what he's good at. He's not going to be able to go out there and just tear apart a defense with his arm. He can make the big play. He can run the ball. He's tough to bring down. Obviously, he relies a lot on Christian McCaffrey to move the chains, and that's fine. They can get a backup running back to kind of take the pressure off him. I think they'll be okay, but they've got to – their number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 priorities this offseason should be finding a pass rush, getting guys in there who can just get after the quarterback and create pressure. without having to send extra guys and, leave your defense susceptible to big passing plays. So if the Panthers are able to do that, find a pass rush, then I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be able to control the clock and get teams off the field. And that's where the Panthers thrive. So Cam Newton in third and short situations is the most dangerous quarterback in the NFL. So if they can do that, they'll be successful. If they, rely on him throwing the ball and moving the ball down the field doing that, they're not going to be successful. It's as simple as that. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to put his defense in bad situations to where they get wore down. And, in the fourth quarter, they're going to be playing from behind a lot. And, you can't expect a team, quarterback by quarterback like Cam Newton, who's more of a playmaker than he is a thrower, to, march him and down the field late in games against defenses who are forcing him to just make, these 6-8 yard throws. They're not going to allow these big 50, 60-yard passes late in games. They're going to force him to meticulously move the ball up and down the field, a la Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, where they can just dissect a defense. That's not Cam Newton's skill set. That's not his talent set. So build around that running game, get a pass rush, and the Panthers, I think will be okay. So once again, Panthers finished 7-9 this last season, and like I said, their defense in the red zone was really bad. Their defense on third downs was really bad. So situationally, defensive situations like that, they've got to get better, and that all stems from a pass rush. So that was the Atlanta Falcons and the Carolina Panthers 2018 seasons. I will be back later this week to talk about the Saints and talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I want to apologize to everybody tonight. I thought I'd have a co-host, but that didn't work out. So for all you people tuning in, I want to thank you for tuning into the Home Dogs podcast. I've been your host, Matt Nicholson, and I will see you later on this week.